The 2021 NBA draft is full of exciting prospects, from Cade Cunningham to Jalen Green, Jonathan Kuminga, and even Brandon Boston. But one prospect that people aren't really talking about that excites me a lot is Isaiah Jackson. He's a forward out of Kentucky, and he's a freak athlete. Today we're going to look at his strengths, weaknesses, as well as an NBA comparison, and then lastly, I'm going to leave you with a question to think about. Let's get into it. At 6'9", 206 pounds, Jackson has the perfect build for the modern big man in today's NBA. His build reminds me a lot of Pascal Siakam. Long, slim, agile, and a little undersized compared to other true big men like Andre Drummond or Clint Capella. If numbers don't impress you and you're more of an eye test guy,
that sounded dirty,
then just watch this dunk that Jackson pulled off at the Kentucky Dunk Contest.
Oh, good. Wow, from a step inside the line.
Okay, that's insane. An 18-year-old just did a one-handed windmill from the free throw line. Dwayne Wade, what do you have to say about that? Probably a 9. Now, we've established that Jackson is an extremely gifted athlete. That plays right into his next strength, defense. Jackson is averaging 2.5 blocks per game at Kentucky this year. Jackson even recorded 8 blocks against Kansas in a matchup earlier in the season. It's not just how many blocks Jackson is getting per game, but how he is getting them in the game. Jackson is able to get off the floor very quickly to defend anything at the rim, and has even come out to block some three-point shooters at times. He has come out of nowhere on some blocks, and has been able to block with either hand also. Is he the next Anthony Davis or Nerlens Noel at Kentucky?
The answer is hell no.
Probably not, but it is still fun to watch him make these athletic defensive plays. While Jackson is an athletic freak and has very good defensive instincts, there is still a lot more for him to work on. Even though Jackson has great defensive instincts, his IQ can get him in trouble a lot of times. He tends to be overly aggressive, which can get him in foul trouble early on in games. Although I said that Jackson is capable of making blocks on the perimeter, one-on-one defending he does still struggle in. He's not set all the time, and against Kansas, he let in a couple big threes because he wasn't ready and didn't have his hands up on shooters. These are mistakes though that can be fixed with maturity and experience down the line. The biggest problem in Jackson's game is his offense. To put it plainly, it stinks.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
He has no range and very little touch at the rim. His form isn't horrible, but no part of me believes any of his shots are going in. One of the biggest ways to tell if someone can shoot or not is their free throw percentage, and Isaiah Jackson is shooting just 53% from the line. We all know the NBA has become a shooter's league, and for Isaiah Jackson to carve out a prominent role in an NBA franchise, he needs to improve his offensive game. A lot of NBA comparisons nowadays usually overhype a player by a lot. Isaiah Jackson, for example, someone easily could say, oh, the next Dennis Rodman, or the next Ben Wallace. I don't want to overhype any players, so I'm not going to do that with these comparisons. I'm going to try to keep them as realistic as possible. So for my comparison for Isaiah Jackson, I chose Chris Boucher.
Who?
Many of you probably aren't very familiar with Chris Boucher. He's a role player for the Toronto Raptors. He's around the same height and weight as Jackson. Just like Jackson, Boucher has elite defensive skills at the rim. You know when the Raptors erased a 30-point deficit against the Mavericks a few years ago? Chris Boucher was a big reason for that. The Raptors ran a full court press that night, and Boucher was the safety in that. Anything that came through the press, Boucher was the last line in defense. That night, Boucher made incredibly athletic plays on defense, just like Jackson has shown in recent college games. Boucher's shot IQ is a little questionable at times, just like Jackson's, but Boucher has grown to have a very consistent jumper at the NBA level. I could see Jackson carving out a similar role to Boucher. A guy that can guard multiple positions, you can implement him in multiple defensive schemes, and a guy that's just a role player in the NBA. I don't see Jackson as a star just yet. I see the potential there, but the offensive side of the ball is just not there for me. But I think his elite defense is enough to make an impact just like Boucher has. As a prospect, Isaiah Jackson is pretty easy to nail down. Defense and athleticism? Good. Shooting, offense, and IQ? Not the best. Like I've said, Jackson has a lot to work on. It wouldn't surprise me in the least bit if he came back for a second year at Kentucky to really work on his offensive game. But I wouldn't count out the NBA draft entirely. A lot of boards have him projected in the late first round, and his stock is rising. The question is, would teams want a defensive specialist just like Jackson?
I don't know.
We've seen the likes of Tony Allen, Andre Roberson, and even Kenneth Faried fade out of the league nowadays. One of the most well-known defensive-based players in today's game is Lou Dort, and even he's able to light it up every now and then. Shooting and spacing is just so crucial in today's NBA, I could see teams steering away from Jackson. I think for a guy like Jackson, he's going to have to find the perfect scenario, so I won't be surprised if he makes it to the NBA, bounces around from team to team, and then finds the perfect fit for him. So I'll leave you with that question. Do you think a guy like Jackson with only a defensive mindset can make it in the NBA nowadays? Or do you believe his shooting must improve in order for him to make an impact on a roster?